Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have all 7 pieces of art that I have made over the past week for the first week of MerMay. Yay! So I've been having a lot of fun over the past week, just playing around with different materials and different techniques and just having fun. Basically. So this first mermaid for day 1, I just did it in my sketchbook because I wanted something quick and easy and I didn't really want to think too hard or worry about ruining a piece of paper or something. So I just did it in my sketchbook. I sketched it out as you saw. Now I'm inking it with with a Tombow calligraphy pen. There's some specific name for it, but I don't know it off of the top of my head and it's not written in English on this pen. So I'm gonna leave a link below to the pen that I used to ink it. And of course I'm using my Copic markers to color it. Usually I don't use my Copics in this sketchbook just because they bleed through to the back of the page, but I decided I didn't care and I wanted to use my Copics for this one anyway. So I will link to all of the materials that I used over the course of this week down below. So if you're interested, you can pick any of those up. As you can tell, I'm still kind of getting used to filming in a traditional art setup. First with not actually being in frame when I was writing Welcome to MerMay, and then here, you know, pardon my head that keeps poking out into the bottom of the frame. That happens a lot, and I occasionally, like, I would catch myself and think, is my head in frame right now? And I'd look up, and obviously by the time I looked up at the monitor, you wouldn't be able to see it. But then when I was editing the footage, I noticed, yes, my head is there. Oops. So yeah, sorry about that. Nothing I can do about it. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to avoid that, but so the second mermaid I decided to do with watercolor because I've been wanting to do more with watercolor. And I think I talked about this a little bit in last week's video with just becoming more comfortable with watercolor and doing it traditionally. And I've also been using these water brush pens from Ohu, I think. Not sponsored, obviously. Like, nobody watches my videos. Why would anybody sponsor me? Yeah, so anyway, I have been using these water brush pens and I've been really liking them because I don't have to worry about like trying to clean a brush in dirty water. And like, I know the trick with the 2 jars of water, but I still feel like I don't like dunking my brush into the dirty water, even if I am just gonna then dunk it into the clean water. I don't know how to keep both jars of water clean anyway. If you don't do watercolor and you haven't heard of that tip, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, but apparently, you know, people advise when you're watercoloring having 2 jars of water, so one of them can be the dirty water and one can be the clean water. But I have trouble actually making that work. For day 3, I wanted to use my Copic markers again, and instead of doing it in my sketchbook, I'm actually using cardstock, which is what you're supposed to use Copic markers on, so they blend really smoothly and nicely. Yeah, I'm still fairly new to all of the traditional media that I use. I wouldn't consider myself an expert or even knowledgeable a little bit in any of them. I'm just sort of learning as I go. And so I've really been enjoying it. And every time I work with Copics, it is sort of a limited color palette because I only have so many markers and so many colors that will blend well together. So for this mermaid, I decided to make her blue because I really like the pastel colors, and that's like most of, as far as, you know, what I have with Copics is I have like one of the standard beginner sets, which was a really great way to get started, and then almost all of the markers that I've bought individually since then are mostly in like the pastel pinks, blues, purples, because those are really my favorite colors. So I get a lot of them so that I can color with them. Yeah. But yeah, for this one I was having some fun with that little texture on her tail, just making dots. I was trying to use a lighter color of marker to kind of lift the color in the darker bit in the dots. I don't know how well it turned out. I know you can sometimes lift color if you're using a darker, or if you're using a lighter marker on top of a darker marker. But I still think it turned out pretty cool. And now for day 4, we're back to watercolor. This one I didn't film the sketch. I don't think I filmed the sketch of day 2 either. So yeah, I'm just inking it here. And for this one and for day 2, I didn't really plan out the line art before I started sketching it on the actual watercolor paper. So those ones ended up a bit more cartoony in the face, I guess, because I didn't really get to play around with it. Whereas for day 3 on the Copics, I actually did the line art digitally first and then printed it out and traced it onto the cardstock. And I think that helped me be a little more confident in the face and just in the pose in general. Whereas this one, I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I just need to sketch something quickly. Again, I apologize for my head poking in there. As you can see, I was wearing my glasses for this because I actually did paint this on the morning of day 5 instead of the evening of day 4, which I was supposed to. But I did draw it on day 4, so it still counts. And I know the scales are a little messed up, but you know what? I don't really care. It's okay. Now on day 5, we're back in my sketchbook. I wanted to do some watercoloring in the sketchbook. And this mermaid was actually inspired by a pose I found on Pinterest. I thought that might be a good way to sort of expand where I was going with things. Because I know when I try and come up with poses off the top of my head, and I haven't been referencing poses lately, they all tend to get kind of boring and samey. So for this, I don't remember what exactly I searched. I think it was like athletic pose or something. And so this was based off of a photo of a dancer. And so obviously instead of having her legs go down to the floor on point, I curved the tail backwards. And I like the way it looks. I'm actually really, really happy with how this turned out. And my sketchbook is not meant for watercolor. It's not really meant for use with wet media, but I still use wet media on it because I don't care. And it does still take the watercolor pretty well. And it's a really good way to experiment and not worry about wasting paper, because one thing that makes me shy away from using traditional media is that when you use the materials, then they're gone. And I'm not so worried about using the watercolors because you use very little watercolor when you're actually painting, and so like I've got a ton of it left, but the paper is finite, or at least it feels finite. And then for day 6, I had sketched something out in my sketchbook, and I really liked the way that it turned out, and I didn't want to try and recreate it anywhere else. So I just took a picture of it, put it up on my computer, and painted digitally over it to finish up the thing. I'm really good at words. I digitally painted over it to finish the image, make it look a little more polished and all of that. This is something that I've kind of been wanting to do for a while, but I never have just painted over a sketch, painted digitally over a traditional sketch. I really like this technique, and I might be doing it more in the future. It's a good way to sort of quickly make something that's a mix of digital and traditional. I've seen a lot of other people do it. And you may have noticed at the beginning I was using the liquefy tool a little bit to tweak the sketch, make it a little better, because that is one thing that I dislike about traditional media, is that there's no liquefy tool. When you put a line down, it's there, and if you don't like it, you either have to erase it and redraw it or just live with it, and I don't like that. I like to be able to fix my mistakes. So that is a nice thing about bringing it in to work on digitally, is that you can then fix it. I think the thing that really makes this piece is her glowing eyes, and that's really one thing that I saw in my head when I had finished the sketch, was that her eyes would be glowing, but that can't really translate that in a pencil sketch, but you could do it with digital painting. And then for day 7, I wanted to make more of an active, or I guess not really active, but I wanted a mermaid who looked like she was doing something rather than just sitting there. So I did a warrior mermaid because I wanted to, I guess. I mean, really, that's the answer to any of these things that I've done throughout the entire week, is why did I do it like that? Because I wanted to. That's really my whole philosophy for this whole month, I think, is just doing things that I want with the constraint of it has to be a mermaid. But other than that, no rules. And it doesn't have to be the greatest thing that I do, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be a mermaid, and that's it. And so for this one, I did a thumbnail in my sketchbook, and then I traced over that digitally to make the line art, and then printed that and traced it out onto watercolor paper. And I think that's a technique that I'm going to continue to use, because I think that really helps me to produce my best work. I'm really proud of how this composition came out. I am not so happy with her left hand, but everything else is good. And if I had had more time, I would have spent a little more time figuring out how to make her hand look a little better. But at this point, I was finishing this sketch at like 8:30 on the 7th. And so I just needed to do it because I knew I wanted to watercolor it, and watercolor takes some time. One thing I did do with this and kind of edited out was I used masking fluid on the staff of her spear, and I didn't really need to do that, but it was good to practice masking fluid because I want to use more masking fluid in the future. Anyway, those are my mermaids for the week. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a thumbs up, leave a like, and if you want to see more videos from me in the future, please subscribe and hit the notification bell because that's the thing that we're telling people to do these days. Thanks so much. I will see you guys next time and have a great rest of your day. Bye!